Simanski of the 62nd.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I've got a little bit of a story to tell you. The final chapters haven't been written, but I really think the story can end with a happy ending. Actually, the tale begins with my own personal journey and my own personal discoveries. Like everyone else, I developed my character, I learned my principles and my values by emulating my parents as I grew up. My financial principles I primarily learned from my mom. She worked in a small company. She managed the front office, and part of her responsibilities was keeping their books. Now, my dad, he was a tool and die maker. And even though he never graduated from high school, he was one of the smartest people I ever knew. My dad could look at a blueprint and build anything in the world. Now, Dad got paid every Friday. So Saturday morning, Mom would go to the bank bright and early. She'd cash Dad's check. She'd come home. She'd take out her box of envelopes, and then she'd physically put the appropriate amount of dollars and cents into each and every expense envelope that she had. Now, Mom had expense envelopes for everything. There were envelopes for all the utilities, for the lights, for the phone, for the electric, for the gas. There were envelopes for insurance payments, car expenses, clothing, food. She even had envelopes for vacation expenses and for Christmas expenses. Yep, that's right. Mom had an envelope she started saving for Christmas gifts the first paycheck of every new year. Now, as society advanced and Mom and Dad got their own checking account, obviously my mom didn't need her system of envelopes anymore, but her financial principles remained exactly the same. She knew exactly how much Dad made, exactly how much money they could spend, exactly how much money they should save, and as far as long-term obligations, they only had one. That was their mortgage payment. Everything else was bought for with cash. Now, when I married my wife, Marie, she and I both applied the same financial principles we learned from our parents to our household budget. We knew exactly how much money we made, exactly how much money we could spend, and we knew we'd want to buy a house someday, so we started putting money aside that would eventually become the down payment for that house. Now, we were blessed with our two sons, Bradford and Clifford. Expense budgeting became a little bit more complicated because we needed more money for the myriad expenses that come from raising a child. We needed more in clothing, and we certainly needed a lot more in food when those two boys became teenagers. Now, when it came to long-term financial obligations, in addition to our mortgage, we knew inevitably we'd have to help our children with college loans, so we thought about how much money we would have to borrow for that. We thought that the probability was that we'd have to replace our vehicles, and we'd probably need a car loan for that. So we put some money aside for that. Now, Marie and I, back in those days, we didn't know much about gap principles, but we did have some common sense. So we knew how much we could spend, and how much we made, and how much we could borrow. As the kids kind of got older, moved out, went on their own, another aspect to our budget process became a factor, and that was our legacy. What would we leave for our children when we passed on? Now, I'm a man of modest means. I got a house that'll be paid off in just a couple of years. I've got a couple of nice guitars. In addition to my wife's engagement ring, she's got one or two pieces of nice jewelry. We have a small bank account. Now, our children will not inherit much, but they will not inherit any debt. Now, I became the first selectman for the town of Granby. I wanted to apply the same financial principles I learned from my parents, the same financial principles that Marie and I used in our household budget. We wanted to apply them to the town of Granby's budget. Well, the town manager quickly set me straight. He told me how naive I was. He didn't use the word stupid, but he implied it. And then he went on to talk about why that wasn't possible. Well, I said, well, if we can't do that, we should at least run the town like a business. Again, he called me naive. He pointed out all the myriad things that a town has to do. You got to keep paving the roads. You got to keep plowing the roads. You have to provide services for recreation, library services, social services. He went on and on and on. Well, it didn't take me too long to find out I'm really not that stupid. That not only can you run a town like a business, but by law you have to run a town like a business. I found out that according to statute, our town would be audited every single year by an independent company. Those auditors look at every nook and cranny in your budget. They look at everything in the revenue column, everything in the expense column, everything in the encumbered column. They look at your general fund to see that it's healthy, and they especially look at your long-term liabilities to make sure you're funded at the appropriate actuarial level. I'm proud to say that every year they found a couple of little things, recommendations as they called them, which we quickly fixed before the next budget cycle. I found out that you have to run your town like a business because there are companies called bond rating agencies. And I found out that you want to get a good bond rating to make your capital projects more affordable when you have to do it. I'm proud to say that over the years, while I was first selectman, we built a brand new police station, a brand new central office for our Board of Education, a brand new senior and youth center. We expanded our town hall. We expanded our high school, building a brand new auditorium and gymnasium, and we expanded and renovated each of our 2 middle schools and high schools. Now, the biggest learning for me, why you have to run your town like a business, is because every year when I would present the budget to the townspeople, the taxpayers, are no different than stockholders in a corporation. They insist on getting a good return in their investment. They want to see that their tax dollars are appropriately spent. So every year during our annual town meeting, I'd have to talk about the items in our revenue column and explain them. I'd have to justify the items in our expense column. I would have to tell them about our general fund, why it's good to put some money in the bank in case you have any unforeseen expenses. I'd also have to explain to them why you couldn't put too much money in. Because when it came time to negotiate with your bargaining units, if you had too much money, you were considered a rich town and you'd be at the short end of that negotiation. If you went to binding arbitration, you were guaranteed to lose. I would also have to explain the various items that were for our long-term liabilities and explain to them the actuarially established appropriate level that we needed to maintain. I'm proud to say that each of the 8 years I was first selectman, the town overwhelmingly passed our budget because those stockholders in the town of Granby saw they were getting good value, a good return on their investment. Now, when I became elected as the representative for the 62nd District, I was going to apply the same financial principles I learned from my parents, the same financial principles that Marie and I used in our household budget, the same financial principles that I learned from running the town of Granby. I wanted to apply them to the state budget. Well, I have to tell you, I was shocked. All those financial principles were turned upside down. I felt like I was walking into the middle of a tornado. Nothing made any sense. When I looked at the things in the revenue column, I find out that we would do things like commingle our special transportation fund, a fund that should be inviolate. We would just mingle them with the general fund. I found out what they meant by gimmicks, sweeping funds, quick fixes. And the one thing that really shocked me and surprised me, I found out we can give our state treasurer a line of credit and delude ourselves into thinking that was a revenue stream. Excuse me. When it came to looking at the expense column, things got even a little more confusing, a little strange. I discovered this thing called a constitutional spending cap. It was something that nobody really paid much attention to. We would just increase it every single year. When it turned out that we were in jeopardy of exceeding the spending cap, well, we would simply do things like, that $500 million sunset for our hospitals, we'll just extend it a little longer. The corporate surcharge that was supposed to sunset, we'll just extend it a little longer. Those economic recovery notes that we were going to pay off, we'll do that sometime in the future. Don't worry about it. And then when I found that even if we did all of that stuff and we were still in jeopardy of exceeding the spending cap, well, we'd have to get a little creative, so somebody came up with an idea. Let's just take Medicaid funds and move them out of the budget. Don't worry about it. Not a problem. Basically, I discovered that any time the state of Connecticut wanted to buy something, they simply did. Just borrow a few more bucks or bond a few more bucks. Don't worry about it. Then I discovered the 2,000-pound gorilla in the room. The gorilla that nobody wanted to talk about are unfunded liabilities. It was such a huge amount that it was crushing the life out of the state of Connecticut. It was such a huge amount that couldn't be paid off in our lifetime, our children's lifetime, great-grandchildren's lifetime. It was huge. When people talked about our unfunded liabilities, they spoke in a quiet voice so as not to wake up that gorilla. I heard such things as, hey, don't worry about it. It used to be $70 billion, but it's like down to $64 billion now. Don't worry about it. Shh. Don't wake up that gorilla. Now, I got to tell you, I wasn't elected to be a whiner or a complainer. Like everybody else in this great esteemed chamber, I was elected to make Connecticut just a little bit better than when I first took the oath of office. I was elected to be a problem solver. How do you solve a problem? Actually, that's a rhetorical question. To solve a problem, you dig down and you ferret out the root cause. When I started looking at Connecticut's budget, separating fact from fiction, it became readily apparent to me that our problem is Connecticut is addicted to spending. Yes, Connecticut is a spending addict. Now, before you call me naive like our town manager, before you poo-poo my idea and call me crazy, I want you to stop for a minute and think about the symptoms of our disease. I had an uncle who was an alcoholic and a grandfather who was an alcoholic, and both of them died from their illness. What happens when you confront an alcoholic with their addiction? It's another rhetorical question. You run into denial. I'd hear things like, I'm not addicted to alcohol. I can quit any time I want. Besides, tomorrow's a new day. Things will get better. Really? That's not true. Whenever I would try to confront someone in the state of Connecticut with our spending addiction, I similarly ran into denial. We're not addicted to spending. We can quit any time we want. Besides, tomorrow's a new day. Things will get better. You just wait and see. Then they would create this mythical illusion, this fantasy world where suddenly money was going to come pouring into our coffers. Connecticut will be cash rich. Everything will be better. Really? That sounds like denial to me. When you confront an alcoholic with their addiction, if you can get past denial, if you can get a little chink in that facade and start talking about the disease, then the blame game starts. An alcoholic's got at least 101 different reasons why they drink. When I'd get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning to go drag my Uncle Nick out of the VFW bar, one of his routine excuses was the painful memory of being a medic in World War II and seeing his buddies die in his arms. I tell him, Uncle Nick, I can't even begin to comprehend how horrible those memories are. But Uncle Nick, you're sick. You need to get better. He'd look at me with mournful eyes. He'd put his hands on my shoulders and say, Willie, you're right. You're right. That was my last drink. I promise. I wasn't privy to my grandfather's excuses, but I do remember my mom and dad constantly shaking their head and saying, it's just one excuse after another. Whenever I would try to confront someone in the state of Connecticut with our spending addiction, if I could get past denial, if I can get a little chink in our facade and start talking about our disease, then the blame game started. I heard such things as, hey, it wasn't me, it was all those evil governors before me. They're responsible for this mess that I'm in. I got to tell you, I heard a good excuse the other day. Someone said it's all George Bush's fault. But I digress. When I would point out that it wasn't the governor, but the legislature that was responsible for the budget, then the excuse would simply change. It was all those evil legislatures before me. They're responsible for this horrible mess that I'm in. Colleagues, stop. Enough already. No more denial. No more blame game. We, the Connecticut House of Representatives for 2014, we are responsible for the financial health of the state of Connecticut from this day forward. The financial health of the state of Connecticut is our responsibility. It's our duty. It's our obligation to our taxpayers. An alcoholic lives from one drink to the next, from one day to the next. They will not look into the future because it's pretty horrifying to think of a day without a drink in their hand. An alcoholic will not look into the future and confront the inevitable consequences to their disease because it's a slow, painful, and terrorizing to think about cirrhosis of the liver that will kill them. We, us, this legislature, we can't continue to live from one budget to the next, from one year to the next. We must look into the future and confront the inevitable consequences to our spending addiction, a slow, painful, and agonizing and horrifying financial death. Colleagues, what will our legacy be? What will we pass on to the next legislatures? In the future, will we be remembered as the legislature that confronted our spending disease, the legislature that turned things around? Will our successors inherit a state that's on the road to financial recovery? 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, will our successors inherit a state that's actually in the black using real gap principles? A state that's vibrant and alive, thriving and growing? A state that has opportunities for everyone, a job for everyone? Or will our legacy be a state that's on financial life support, a state that's gasping for its last final breaths? Colleagues, those are the only two options: financial health or financial death. I truly believe that we, the Connecticut House of Representatives for 2014, we are facing right now a financial crisis, a life or death situation. No. Colleagues, I consider it an honor and a privilege. I consider it a blessing to serve with each and every person in this esteemed chamber. I know many of you personally on both sides of the aisle. I know we all have good hearts. I know each and every one of us wants to make Connecticut a little better than when we were first elected. But colleagues, we have to look into the future. We have to confront the inevitable consequences of our spending addiction. Colleagues, I feel your pain. I know it's horrifying and terrorizing to look into the future and face that inevitable financial death. I feel your pain. Believe me, it's no easier on this side of the aisle. It hurts. But colleagues, we must get better. Colleagues, we can get better. I'm a visual person. It helps me sort things out if I create a picture in our mind. I have a picture that when it comes time to press the button, the person has their finger poised over the green button. I can hear the wheels spinning in their head as they say, I'm not addicted to spending. I can quit any time I want. Besides, tomorrow is going to be better. I can see as they have their finger poised over the button, they close their eyes, take a deep breath, and breathe out. Ah, that felt good. Conversely, I have a picture in my mind of a person getting ready to press the red button, and their finger is trembling. They're grabbing it with the other hand to stop the tremors. To me, pressing the red button is like symbolically getting to the front of the room and identifying yourself. Hello, I'm the state of Connecticut, and I'm addicted to spending. Colleagues, please, 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 when it comes time to vote, don't bury your head in the budget, but look into the future to the inevitable consequences of our spending disease if we don't stop. Please join me today. Take the road to recovery. Press the red button. Hello, I'm the state of Connecticut, and I'm addicted to spending. Thank you, Madam Speaker.